I was listening to another podcast that you'd been interviewed on in the last couple of years, and you said, I don't really like categorizing people, which was in response to someone asking you about being vegan. And I thought that was a highly curious thing for an information architect, a founding father of information architecture to say. Is there no longer a place in IA for absolutes?
That's a great question. I think that information architects have always been wary of being categorized because we understand the power of labels and categories. Especially when we talk about people, because there's so much power going on in the language and classification around people, I strongly prefer spectrums over categories, right? So, if you sort of ask me, Peter, are you a vegan? I have to ask you, what are the rules for that? Like how, it's really, you can get down to really specific details of whether or not I actually count as a pure vegan, right? And so I prefer to say I'm veganish, right? Like I'm fairly high on the vegan spectrum, but every once in a while it's like our daughters might order a pepperoni pizza and I just can't resist having a piece, right? And so it's like, from a purist philosophical perspective, I would prefer not to eat animal products. And, as I said, again, I just moved down to farm country, right? I'm living amongst farmers. We have the cows we have 5 baby calves that are living right next to me, they're living in our field and I feed them grain every morning. And yet they are, owned by a beef farmer and they're not going to get to stay here forever. And, I have to kind of reconcile myself with, the role that I'm playing in this system. And ultimately I'm not 100% against people, eating animals. I am 100% against factory farming, right? The large scale there's so much cruelty to people and animals in those systems. I think they're just pure evil and we need to abolish them one way or another. But a small scale farmer where your cows are mostly living happy lives, I can't necessarily say that's wrong, right? So,
But there would be some people out there, to your point, that would go, Peter, you're not vegan enough.
Right, exactly.
They live in the world of the absolute, which strikes me as being the danger that the sort of trends around gender identity and sexual orientation and all the other things that we've seen, this rejection of the pigeonhole seems to be fighting against, for lack of a better word.
The funny thing is, I haven't actually bumped into any vegans who would criticize me, for being veganish. There's plenty of my friends and relatives who are, full on omnivores and love to eat steak and who love to pick holes, right? Like, Peter, I heard you had a slice of pepperoni pizza last week, So, and I think that actually is a sign of people who are struggling with their own place, and their own morality, right? It's messy. That I don't believe in striving for purity. I think that's dangerous. And I think there's a funny term I heard from a guy who was defending hunting. He lives in the rural kind of, I guess, western part of the country. And he hunts elk and feeds himself and his dog during the winters on elk. And he's arguing that his way of living is more sustainable than most vegans. He used the term fossil fuel vegans, right? So it's like if you're going to the grocery store and buying your lettuce and your tomatoes, from some big chain, right? I mean, where did those things come from, right? Like hundreds, thousands of miles away, on trucks or airplanes or who knows what, boats. How many fossil fuels were burned in order for you to have your tomato? And so there's very few people who are living this pure life, not causing damage to the planet and its creatures. So we can all try to do our part. We can all try to do better. But I really try to judge people less and less over time.